This is a cloud weather alert. Tracking Ian.
Good late Sunday, everybody. Meteorologist Casey Cloud here in the Weather Center with the latest on Tropical Storm Ian. We're really monitoring it very carefully here in the Sunshine State and for our South Georgia counties as well as it's starting to get its act together. It looks like on our infrared satellite imagery and the Hurricane Center up the winds there to 60 miles an hour. The max sustained winds at 8 o'clock advisory. So Roy just got to be watching this very carefully. If you haven't been checking in over the weekend, we're going to try to give you the latest right now, and you just want to continue to check in here through the week. The forecast is starting to become a little bit more defined. I know during the weekend, really, we saw some fluctuations back and forth, but I think when we get this update at 11 o'clock, we'll see a forecast that shifts a little bit to the east here. So we're just going to be watching this carefully. You see that pinkish looking model, that's the consensus model, and the Hurricane Center likes to follow that generally here. In the Euro model, that's east of the official forecast track. So we just want to be mindful of that here. As you see the system, I'll kind of dive down to the south. You see the convection here. I mean, really go back 4 hours ago. You just start to see the beginnings of the purple and the colder cloud tops evolving. But when we have the colder cloud tops, that means stronger storm activity here, and that means the winds are going to intensify, and we're going to see this strengthen. You see, expect to become a Category 2 hurricane here as we look ahead even just to get up to a Cat 1 here soon. I mean, by tomorrow afternoon, it looks like it'll be up to that strength. So evolving quickly, a rapidly intensifying hurricane is what we're really expecting to evolve here. You see a Cat 4 hurricane off of the Keys by early Wednesday here. Some of the models may be a little bit weaker with it than that. They might bring that down just a tad, but really that's not going to make much of a difference. A 3 to a 4 there, as we do have that potential for the surge to really start to become a factor later on because of the strength of this system. Now you do see the Keys there; they're under a tropical storm watch as we're looking down there toward the lower Keys. So we'll continue to watch things with this. But you see the divergence here, and this is why I think we're going to have an update with the track here at 11. Now you'll be able to get that at cloudweather.com/tropics if it doesn't come out during this update here. And cloudweather.com, that homepage, updating that here. But you see the white, that's the official track tracking at more toward the eastern Big Bend toward, or just there toward Taylor-Dixie counties, that general vicinity. But I think we'll see a shift more over toward west central Florida here. As you see, this is our consensus model. The TVC and Hurricane Center really likes this here, just the overall formulation, and just they use that a lot. And I really think this makes more sense here, honestly. We've seen storms in the past, not saying this will have the direct impacts here exactly the same, but we saw Charlie, we've seen Irma here. In the past, they kind of have a tendency to go further on over there when they get close to land. They want to go ahead and just come on shore there. So you just got to be kind of mindful of that here. I know with Charlie, it was projected to go to Tampa, ended up making landfall around Punta Gorda. I mean, that was a very rapid change, expected to come in, I believe, as a Category 2 hurricane, ended up striking Punta Gorda as a 4. Some folks really weren't already, so we want everybody in the cone of concern here that I'm going to see in a little while to stay on guard. These are just models and tracks, but the cone of concern is where we really need to be paying attention, so I'll get to that here in a moment. But you do see here our Category 3 storm may be off of Bradenton according to this latest model run. You see maybe a Cat 1 north of Tampa, but this is a very slow mover. I mean, going in a 12-hour increment here, not very far. I mean, 12 hours, folks, and this is projecting this to go 47 miles or so. So that's a real slow mover. We're going to be pumping in that moisture, that storm surge. This type of track would be probably one of the worst case scenarios for Tampa Bay here as we're looking at this mapping, because they'd be on the eastern side and very close in proximity here, that Tampa area. So this would be a concern as we're looking out here toward Tampa. So just got to be really careful here and monitor this situation because that could really pump in the storm surge, and the wind threats would be going up some. I have some local effect graphics we'll get to here in a moment, but they're highly variable here. The numbers on those at this point are subject to change because we're just seeing a lot of different things, and the models are still telling us different scenarios are really still on the table. But it seems like we're getting a little bit better consensus, at least. I mean, earlier on in the weekend, it'd have been hard to really come up with any numbers. I mean, the ranges would just be really crazy, but we have some numbers for you here. and things look a little more likely to come to fruition based on our forecast and what we could have told you yesterday. As things start to come together, the storm starts to organize, and that becomes an issue. But it does help the models here because they're able to kind of figure out exactly where the worst of the accident is and track that on off. So we're just going to be watching this here. You see maybe a tropical storm as we get toward, this is all the way into Friday here. But we'll be getting that moisture coming in probably even as early as Wednesday here toward north central Florida. So just to be kind of mindful here is what you need to do. We've been talking about a tornado threat that could emerge as early as tomorrow toward the Florida Keys there. That's in the SPC outlook we're going to say. So a lot going on here, but all eyes are on Ian here. It ended up getting that name, not Hermine, as we had another storm develop before that there out in the Atlantic. So that got the H name, this got the I name, and I name storms have a bad history in the past. I mean, Ida last year, of course, Ike in 2008 toward Texas, 2017 Irma. So not what you want to hear. I mean, to go on and on about that history. These storms just generally, it's just the time of year really. They have the most potency, it seems, here based on all the warm water temperatures, things like that. It's just the way things work out generally as we're closer to peak season, at least a little past it. But looking at the recon data here, I see 54 knots. I saw a minute ago. I didn't see if that one was one of those that was maybe contaminated, but just checking. I see a 40 knot, 50 knot. I didn't have any contamination in it from 55 past the 8 o'clock hour. So that there has a 991 surface pressure there, a 989 pressure found by the Hurricane Hunter aircraft out there. I know Roy, the folks there in the National Hurricane Center are trying to get as many things into their models as they can because things have been murky. But on the one side, things coming together really help the models. On the unfortunate side, though, things coming together mean this is not just probably going to fizzle away here and not evolve. It is going to evolve. Now, we are expecting weakening here as it gets toward the northern Gulf, which would be some good news, but the storm surge though would already be built up to some extent here. The tornado threat also could be pretty substantial here as we're looking toward north central and northeast Florida. If things kind of come together and shearing apart, potentially getting some of that drier air to mix in, we'll have to watch here. Now, the threat toward the west, maybe not so much, as temperatures could be pretty cool there towards south central Georgia as we're looking on the back side of things. So that's kind of intriguing from that standpoint. But we're just going to have to keep watching, looking at my notes here. There's still a lot of uncertainty. I know even another topic to touch on, we've had the rip current threat around, and unfortunately, some sad news reported by WJX and WFOX television there toward Jacksonville Beach earlier. Chief Meteorologist Mike Burris reporting there that we had one person there that died in rip currents there and one person hospitalized. So just a tragic situation there, and rip current threats are going to be an issue toward west central Florida here with Ian coming on up as well. I mean, just the overall pattern here as we're looking, rip currents are going to be an issue across the region really. As we're looking ahead, it's going to be too dangerous to be out in the water. And it's just a nice weekend. Folks trying to take advantage of that. I mean, the temperatures right now, even sitting pretty nice out there, upper 60s, lower 70s here. Most of our viewing area, we're at 70 even right now here east of Stark. So things are nice, but unfortunately, things can turn tragic in a hurry. So again, just kind of got to keep an eye on all those marine hazards here as we're looking ahead into toward the timeline. But again, we're tracking Ian here, folks, in the Weather Center. We're going to go ahead and switch on over right now toward our show now, our graphics, because we have quite a few things to show you here. Again, a big deal this system is, and the tropical climatology, as we were alluding to, would suggest here until about mid-October, really still have a pretty high likelihood of some tropical storms and hurricanes out there. And in fact, we do have here Gaston out there, not an issue, but Ian is what we're focused on, and it seems like after kind of a slow start, it's really starting to get organized. We went from 45-mile-an-hour max sustained winds in the 5 o'clock update from the National Hurricane Center to 60-mile-an-hour sustained winds in the 8 o'clock update. And here's your cone of concern, and we're more focused on the cone of concern than ever, really, with a system because there's still so much variability. Granted, I think we're starting to see a little bit more confidence, and we'll start to see a shrinking of that uncertainty and a shrinking of the cone here. But tropical storm watch for the lower Florida Keys, and I'll step out of the way to see these numbers here real quick. You can kind of see what we're talking about here. 60-mile-an-hour winds at movement northwest at 12 miles an hour, and that minimum pressure 991 millibars in that update. But again, we see some different numbers out there. We'll have to see exactly what the Hurricane Center goes with in that 11 p.m. update. And then above my head here, I'll kind of step on over, but we just got to be mindful here because that storm surge, it could be significant with this storm here, folks. We just got to be really careful with the setup that we're in because we're going to have that water here coming on into the picture as we're looking ahead toward the timeline with this. And wind direction going to be kind of pushing it in depending on exactly where this makes landfall. So again, we're just going to watch things. You see hurricane warnings there toward western Cuba. You see the hurricane warning threat down there. You see tropical storm warning also in the dark blue toward areas a little bit further over in Cuba. So again, we're going to be tracking this. You see the movement, 120-mile-an-hour winds there, max sustained at 2 p.m. on that Tuesday. 100-mile-an-hour max sustained there by the time we get to 2 p.m. on Thursday. So some weakening. This could be further east in the track, again, like we've alluded to here, because the consensus model, the European model, shifting on off toward the east in general here, and even the American model, it was further west yesterday. So that kind of tells the weather story here. Things eventually here are going to come into a clearer consensus. But right now, still some murkiness, but things seem to be getting a little bit more defined here in the forecast to some extent. You see that weakening by the time it gets near Valdosta, maybe on Tuesday, or on, excuse me, not on Tuesday, on Friday. I know on Tuesday we'll be tracking it down toward Cuba, and we've really been tracking this since last Tuesday with the updates. But next Friday here, as we're looking ahead, we're going to be watching things carefully here with this setup. Just about 5 or so days away, give or take, 5-6 days away. It's moving out of that picture, but right now we have to be just cognizant of what could happen with this setup here, all the different local impacts here. But this could be anywhere in this cone. I was going to try to say this here. I mean, you see it can make landfall anywhere from Pensacola still, according to this cone of concern, to the Fort Myers area, pretty much. So there's still a lot of options on the table. Granted, I think they're starting to narrow, as we talked about with that consensus model, the TVCN, and then the European model as well here. We're going to go ahead and say right now, though, our information here, the most likely arrival times and chances for tropical storm force winds, so you can kind of get an idea of when you need to wrap up those preparations here. As we look ahead, you can see the purple everywhere. We have high confidence in the wind. That's all past Cuba and toward the Gulf of Mexico here. But you see some of those pretty high percentages there approaching the coast there toward the Big Bend, toward west central Florida. So definitely got to be taking this seriously here as we are watching things. Again, just check in for more updates if you're in the past, though. Secure property, especially the loose stuff here at this point. The stuff that's really vulnerable, I would start to take action with. You don't have to do everything yet. You still have a little more time here, especially toward northern Florida here, another couple of days. But southern Florida, you see, and west central Florida, you might really need to get things wrapped up by the time you go to bed Tuesday night here. I mean, you might have end of the day Wednesday a little bit here in North Florida, though, besides some of the outer squalls starting to impact you. But I mean, everything really have to be wrapped up in the Tampa area here before you go to bed there Tuesday night, it seems, because just a situation that could get pretty nasty there with the deteriorating weather. And just make sure check to see if you're in an evacuation zone, because if you're told to evacuate here in a mandatory evacuation, you want to be prepared. So just kind of sort that out now, figure out what you would do in that type of scenario here, and then just keep in mind that staying in areas vulnerable to storm surge can be really dangerous, if not deadly here, and then mobile homes can be risky as well because of that wind. The potential for destructive wind could exist. We're not exactly sure on that at this point, though, because that's going to depend on the track and intensity here of where the worst of the winds try to come ashore at, because it could stay out in the Gulf a little bit and weaken off a little bit more before those strongest winds really start to come ashore. We're not sure yet. That's why you got to check in for those updates. But just get important supplies here, and just a reminder there that electricity could be out for an extended period of time, and be ready to charge up your devices like your phone, so you have a way to communicate to the outside world here if you lose power. And hopefully, just hoping there that your connection there with your providers still online, so you're able to get that information out. At least hopefully you can get some calls or text are sometimes a little bit easier to send after a storm or during a storm to get information out in, because they don't really require quite as much there in the overall world there that is technology. So again, let's go ahead and show you right now some of the graphics I put together. These are subject to change here, folks. I sometimes put a disclaimer on here, but everything is still on the table here to some extent at this point for the state of Florida. So that's why you got to stay tuned. But be ready. I mean, we saw Charlie that sipped here in '04 so quick. I mean, it was headed toward Tampa until it was, and it sipped it off toward Punta Gorda there very quickly on that Friday the 13th in 2004. So we just have to be really on top of things here. But you see, right now I've gone a little bit higher toward Tampa than what the official forecast would say for sure. As of now, again, that could shift off some at 11. You see 85-mile-an-hour maximum gust here. That's what we're expecting right now. Sarasota 75 miles per hour to maximum gust. 65 toward Orlando, 60 there, Cape Canaveral. I know the Artemis mission there being postponed again. They did launch off some stuff there last night, saw it outside, but again, I think it's gonna be kind of deteriorating eventually as we're getting towards Central Florida, and then Vero Beach there a little bit less because it's gonna be a little bit away from this, it seems like. But at the coast, you'll still have some wind coming in. I have 55 right now for that peak wind gust and 50 miles an hour down toward West Palm Beach there. But now let's look toward our viewing circle here. This is important to some extent. Granted, this is kind of a broad brush and subject to change, but right now, 75 for those coastal counties here toward Taylor, Dixie there, and Levy. We're talking about the highest gust there could be upwards of hurricane force. That could go up or down, though, based on the track, based on the intensity here. There's still a pretty big range of possibilities that could occur. So please check in for more updates here on this. You see, I have 60 toward Gainesville, Jacksonville, Palm Coast, Brunswick, and Valdosta. We'll try to refine this a little bit more later on, though. This could end up being a pretty good forecast because as this gets north and weakens off some, that wind field is going to expand here as we look ahead, even though the max winds won't be as high. So Roy just wanted to broad brush this, but on Tallahassee there, I have 50 miles an hour for that peak because they're on the western side here, based on my forecasting, based on even the official Hurricane Center forecast. So if this really gets close to, they'll maybe get into an eye wall, and then that would change that number pretty dramatically, though. So you still got to stay tuned for updates here. But you see our forecast for rain from the Weather Prediction Center. They really broad brushed this for the next 7 days because of all that uncertainty here. You see much of the state of Florida here really expected to get 5+ inches of rain. Granted, this is going to depend on how things set up. You actually see the heaviest rain maybe, according to this at least, toward the first coast. I mean, that's what this is showing, that official forecast right now, closer to 10 inches toward coastal Duval and coastal St. John's, coastal Flagler as well. Again, you can look at that interactive radar, cloudweather.com/radar, but of course we'll be on if and as needed. We're going to be on a bunch here with different streams as things transpire. Even if we're not actually talking, we'll have things streaming in terms of satellite and or radar here. So just keep that in mind. You have all those different outlets that we were showing you at the beginning of the video. You can get all those links there, cloudweather.com, that homepage as well. But your hurricane season rainfall forecast from me here, based on the calculations I've done. Again, this is highly subject to change. But this is through Friday. Here we're talking about 6 to 8 inches of rain toward those coastal areas, toward Dixie, Levy, and Taylor there. But then 5 to 7 toward Gainesville, toward Palm Coast. That forecast pretty much applies towards Stark as well. Keep in mind, the European models went quite a bit more than this here, but some models still went quite a bit less. So that's why we don't want it to go to the higher end here. But just keep in mind, localized higher amounts are a possibility, if not a likelihood, in this type of setup. And then we have 4 to 6 inches there toward Jacksonville and Valdosta, 3 to 5 inches toward Tallahassee, being on the west side potentially, and then Brunswick. Things maybe start to dry out a little more with that dryer, and things start to ripped apart with the system. We might not get quite as much rain up there. We have to watch out, though. It's really not a certain forecast right now, but just in theory, as you get more dry air coming in, more in the way of wind shear ripping things apart, we could get that tornado threat to increase. You just have to be really mindful of that here toward our area. It's several days out, so we don't know yet, but Just something to keep in mind here as we look at those tornado safety tips now. You can see if there's tornado watch issued, and this is a threat that really many of our counties, if not all 60, two of them would be under at some point. The tornado threat here with the tornado watch being in play. I mean, it depends exactly on where it makes landfall, though, because I say that threat. Uh, don't want to backtrack too much with that, though. I would think probably southwest Georgia, south central Georgia, they may be on the western side here enough where they wouldn't actually get as much rotation there, that cooler air coming in. So may not have to worry as much, especially once they get to that point there with the track. But a lot of our counties definitely, especially in north central Florida, northeast Florida, the first coast, really need to be mindful of this tornado threat here. Just make sure you're charged of those devices in case of power loss and have multiple ways to receive alerts. Southeast Georgia here as well to some extent. And whenever a tornado warning is in play here, a tornado being detected using radar or spotted is a story. We saw one of these in Michael in 2018. It wasn't a big story because of just all the destruction out west, but we actually had some reports of a tornado here in Michael when it made landfall in Panama City. So you just don't need to have a storm right over you to have those tornado effects. Of course, we had those effects also last year. The tornadoes there toward Duval County and toward southeastern Georgia, the Keens Bay base area as well. But just remember to get as many walls between you and the outside as possible and to protect yourself from blind debris. Put on that bicycle helmet here. That's very important in this type of situation. And here's the initial tornado threat as outlined there from the Storm Prediction Center in Norman, Oklahoma. You see Key West there, Big Pine Key under this here tomorrow into early Tuesday. Higher tornado threat generally on the eastern side of storm there, so have multiple ways to receive alerts. And then Tuesday into Wednesday, you see this marginal risk here, Tampa southward really. You have that potential for these storms to rotate, potentially produce tornadoes. So even as you're finalizing your storm preps down there, not a constant in terms of the rain and that threat, but you'll be getting those outer squalls that could start to produce those tornadoes. We saw with Irma, not saying this is Irma, but with the threat there, it made landfall there Sunday, but we had a bunch of tornado warnings on Saturday in the southern part of the Florida Peninsula that Saturday there in 2017. But just remember those preparedness considerations. Check in for updates and make sure your hurricane kit is up to date. A basic disaster supplies kit includes water, non-perishable food, a battery power, a hand crank radio, no weather radio as well, a flashlight first aid kit here. Just important to have all this stuff. You want to have extra batteries on hand too. Just that full list there available at ready.gov/kit. And inland flooding, this could become a real big concern based on that slow movement. We'll try to dive into that more as the situation evolves. Really, I have it down here in my notes, and I wanted to touch on that. We're not just talking about the inland flooding from the rain. We could have a river flooding. We could have more than just that too. That's because the antecedent rainfall, but that storm surge flooding could be severe here toward the west coast of Florida and maybe the Big Bend, depending on the overall wind direction as this tracks on in. I mean, that water really going to pile on up and cause issues. Just got to mitigate those threats the best you can, especially here inland. You can do that with sandbags and other items and methods, though, overall. Try the best you can here. Just charter those devices. Again, we keep emphasizing that because you want to have a way to be connected to the outside world here. Of course, extra batteries are helpful as well, but for your cell phone, something like that, at least try to get that good charge on 100% charge here before the storm comes on in. So even if you lose power just for a few hours, you're potentially there good to go, depending on how old your cell phone is and how long the charge lasts. But you can see here also watching the tornado potential and then also watching there the potential for after the storm, those power lines to be down. And generator safety is critical here in this type of situation. That's very critical. We have a lot of fatalities sometimes after the storm here. After these storms come through, you have big time problems arise, and unfortunately, we have some big issues that ultimately develop. So you just gotta be really cognizant of that. Just so much to talk about here on this special update on this Sunday. Of course, you can get the latest cloudweather.com/tropics when we're not on, but there's just different storms that are intriguing in general. I know looking back 1950, we had Hurricane Easy. That's the last, I believe it is, direct hurricane landfall toward Taylor, Dixie, or Levy counties. So it's been a long time since we've had that direct track in toward those regions. Granted, we've had a bunch of other impacts over the years. Of course, we had Dora in '64, and then we've talked about it before, but a storm in the 1800s was a Category 2. That was a big deal as well here. So just continuing to watch everything here in the local area. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and pull up that graphic if I can real quick. I didn't have another show, but since we kind of started to touch on that, let me go ahead and pull up our information here, our hurricane history, if I'm able to, here in our system, because I think that's kind of important just to give you guys an idea here of exactly what happened in the past with some of these, because different things can evolve on us here and cause issues, obviously. So, actually, I don't think we. Oh, here we go. Okay, just want to go ahead and switch you on over to that. I didn't put it in the show, but we'll go ahead and put it in the show as we're live on the air and just discussing, because this is interesting. Right now, we're not expecting something this significant as that unnamed hurricane in 1896, but as the threat, even if this made landfall, it probably weakened on down some with this here as it got further on in. But because of the overall setup here with that dry air trying to tear things apart. So that's something to keep in mind. But that actually made landfall on September 29th, and it could do the same here, this system, Ian. So that's interesting to see. I mean, the overall tracks here, I know it says towards Stark where we're at in north central Florida, but really looking back, Cedar Key, similar story, really. With this type of setup with some of the worst impacts. Again, Easy was the last one there to make landfall. This barely did it. It meandered in the Gulf and caused a state rainfall record there. I mean, we're talking about 45 inches of Easy. This isn't going to still out, hopefully, like that. I mean, it's not completely out of the question because there's still a lot of uncertainty, but hopefully it doesn't do loops and the like that storm did back 72 years ago. But we're going to be watching it here for you in the Weather Center. I mean, the state of emergency is in effect for all 67 counties here in the Sunshine State. So definitely a lot to track here in the coming days. Really trying to finalize those preparations, get a handle on exactly where this is going. I know that official track will be out soon. You can get that at clardo.com/tropics there, unless we happen to get a next minute or two before we wrap this up. I know different stories across the country have had a couple tornado warnings sporadic here last couple of days, one toward Arkansas, Missouri yesterday, and toward mid-Atlantic here today. But again, I think we pretty much caught you up on everything you need to know here right now. There's just still a lot of uncertainty here, but we're going to get through this together here from the Weather Center. So there's your infrared look. You see all that convection here, those cold cloud tops. The story with this is strengthening. We'll find out the latest numbers at 11 or so from the Hurricane Center. It sometimes comes out a little bit early there. So that's something you might want to check in on a few minutes early at the website, again, clardo.com, and then maybe streaming stuff even as early as tonight, depending on how things come together. Not coming back on necessarily for any type of formal update, but maybe streaming satellite, something like that here. So look for that on YouTube and some of our other sources as well. Of course, subscribe on YouTube. That's a helpful way to get an idea of exactly what's coming your way. You can even watch that on your Roku device. So that's definitely helpful as well. Thanks so much for tuning in. Thanks so much for trusting me. We've covered everything we need to for now. There's just so much to talk about, though. We're going to be watching it here for you from the Weather Center.